Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. When we say isqat upon the entirety of the limbs, and we speak of the spiritual journey and of the upward ascent of the soul through the heavens, that occurs when your limbs become your heart, when you become a heart. But first, your soul, your lower nafs, must know that she is commanding onto evil. Annaha ammara. God can take you from the ammara, the commanding soul, through the 7 souls all the way to the perfected soul within a blink of an eye. But for us, from our perspective, in suluk, from the perspective of wayfaring, that's impossible. For God, anything is possible. So you begin by teaching your soul that it is ammara, that it commands onto evil. And when she knows her state, she will accept it and will accept to be taught. She will be able to discern between giving and taking, instruction and receiving instruction. So then you teach her. She must first know she is ammara. When she knows that, she will want to learn. Then you teach her al-lawwama, the lamenting one. This is 2nd grade. Then you encourage her and cause her to forget the ammara, so that she has an intellect, aql, and she can see and lament, and all the limbs can lament. Otherwise, if you let her remember the ammara, the commanding soul unto evil, then she will always be in an internal struggle. So go from one to the next and forget the one you just graduated from. Shaykh al-Alawi says, أَوَّلُهَا جُنُونَ. The beginning of the path, all of it is madness. It's an internal struggle, in other words, between the two opposites, the two polarities within the soul. Then, when you cause it to forget one and enter to the next, you enter into the mulhama, the inspired soul. She comes to know with certainty that she is mulhama, inspired, and inspires you to do good works. Now she forgets her amariya, the nature of her commanding self, commanding unto evil, and she forgets al-lawwama, the lamenting one. And Allah says, وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ. Remember, invoke your Lord if you forget, or when you forget. Now she's forgotten the grade 1 and 2. Now you teach her 3, and you enter her into the principles of al-mutma'inna, the soul at peace. Now the limbs have serenity. This status of itmi'nan, of serenity, occurs when the body becomes a spirit and the spirit becomes the body. The body is in a state of serenity and tranquility. And that nafsul mutma'inna, then you bring her to her Lord. فَارْجِعِي إِلَىٰ رَبِّكِ أَيَّتُهَا النَّفْسُ الْمُطْمَئِنَّةِ. Now you can teach her ma'rifah. You can teach her what it means to know her Lord. Now she learns lordship, rububiyyah. Then she can read in the name. Now you read in the name of thy Lord. اقرأ باسم ربك. You read the name. You read the attribute or quality. And where will she read lordship? Within herself, within her own configuration, within the createdness of her own blood clot. خلق الإنسان من علق. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Read in the name of thy Lord who created the human being from a clot. So she comes closer and begins to shrink and get smaller and smaller. Tasghir, her status shrinks and she becomes a clot. And now she roams in the ocean of divine approval. She enjoys good pleasure, and she will reject the body when she finds peace in lordship. And she disappears from all forms and from the body and becomes a clot, a reflection of the luminous representation. And now she's a reflection because she wants to accept the higher method. Now the limbs are moving in prayer. Now the nur of the prayer is found, and that nur is tied to its time. The time of the prayer is linked to its luminosity. You won't draw the luminosity of subh at the time of duha. If you pray fajr at 9 a.m., you're doing a qada. you are making up the prayer, but you're not drawing its nuraniyah. The nuraniyah of each prayer is muqayyad, conditioned or qualified by its time. Now you enter into the baqiyatul salihat, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. And these erase your sins of the prayer like the foam in the ocean. And you do that in the hopes that your prayer will be accepted. The one who's performed this prayer, that prayer is raised by 5 names. And it goes to the heart. It goes to the throne of Allah, to the all-encompassing name of Allah. And that prayer that goes and reaches the heart, the person who performs it takes 50 instead of 5. He's praying in the Kaaba. 100,000 prayers are worth 1 prayer in the Kaaba. So when that person prays 5 prayers, it's worth 50 times 100,000. So say 50 million prayers or something a day, if you master the prayer. This, my son, is the disclosure of expansiveness, of bast. This is why you perform a lot of devotion and ibadah in states of bast, so that the bast is counted in the millions. Why pray in qabd, in that state of constriction? That prayer is refused anyway. You just cling to the essentials and the basics, and you're blowing onto your left, as per the hadith, to blow away shaitan. And you're just making up to raqi'u, you're sewing up your prayers. As for the prayer with all the limbs that I described above, this is the prayer of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. This is sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Pray the way you've seen me pray. Working on it, walking to the prayer, making the dua of light, so that the 5 names of the prayer, so that their luminosity is cast entirely and totally, and so that he alayhi salatu wasalam disappears from his dimensions and from his horizon and his muhit, from what surrounds him, and he becomes a trace of the most beautiful divine names. So in bast, in expansiveness, load your nafs, charge her, weigh her heavily. Don't say, the Prophet ﷺ just prayed 4 prayers before Asr. No, pray 40 prayers before Asr. Pray 40 after Dhuhr. You're in bast. Take advantage of it and forget the waswas, the sly whispers of the nafs that'll tell you, what, you think you're better than the Prophet ﷺ? All of the cycles of prayer that you'll pray through your entire life don't equal a single cycle of prayer of his. You're praying in the hopes that perhaps you may see him ﷺ lead you in prayer, that you may see him as your imam. So the constriction is your night, and the expansion is your day, the rise of your sun. And yet, during the day, Dhuhr and Asr are prayed in silence when the sun goes up. And at night, you pray out loud. You pray in jahr. And God's folk tend to recite Suratul Ikhlas more at night. Qul huwallahu ahad. Here, you're proclaiming Tawheed. Al-Jahru bit-Tawheed at night. And you say Suratul Ikhlas, proclaiming God to be one. And in the day, you recite the longer surahs and silently. Because during the day, you're actually in farq. Cosmically, when the sun rises, you're in the realm of separation. Even though internally, your bast is the realm of the rise of the sun. It's your day. But externally, your day is your night. Because the day is where you are in separation, and at night is when you collect yourself to God, and at night is your day, and your day is your night. And so at night your prayers are out loud. You declare your surahs openly to yourself and you hear them. But during the day, when you're in separation and in farq, you say them silently. If you practice this prayer with the isqat that I described to you, with your limbs, as you pray, you will notice that you're becoming taller, and you will love the prayer at day. Daytime prayer will be beloved unto you. But when you pray at night, the carpet will begin to lift for you, right under your feet, and you will experience constriction and fear, in contrast to the day when you grow taller and you see the beauty. Your prayer during the day, you become taller and you begin to notice things under you, like you're standing on a mountaintop and you behold the beauty of the divine names. At night, God lifts the entire prayer carpet under you, and you fear that you'll slip away and fall. And the more constriction you experience in the night prayer, the smaller your prayer carpet, your sajjada becomes. This is constriction for the people of Allah. And you experience constriction until your sajjada is no longer there. Your prayer carpet disappears. It's been lifted and you disappear. You're no longer there either. And in expansion, in bust, during the day, you grow so tall that when you prostrate, your forehead touches the Kaaba. Others grow so tall that they pierce into the first heaven and they touch Sayyidina Adam in sujood. Others still grow so tall that they go to the higher heaven and enter and touch Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu salam with their forehead. Others almost destroy the inhabited house, al-Baytul Ma'mur, when they prostrate. That's how tall you become. All of the heavens are from the shoulder beneath you, not the head. Everything from your shoulder downwards are the heavens in this prayer. And Shaykh al-Alawi describes this prayer, and he says, وَاقِفٌ تَحْتَ سَقْفِ الرَّحْمَنِ, I am standing under the roof of the All-Merciful. Now you will truly say, قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ, the coolness of my eyes is in the prayer. Now you will know what it means to say that the prayer is the pillar of the religion, without which the entire religion would crumble. Now you understand what the Messenger says when he says, alayhi salatu salam, that our covenant is the prayer. And if you abandon the prayer, you've disbelieved. هذا كفر. It's the rope from the blessed tree that's extended from the tree down to the locus of prostration. And you become that rope. That's why you become so tall. And then you gather and you bring the entire heavens into you. In this prayer, in the prayer of the people of Allah, you will sweat and perspire. You will experience ru'b, terror in your qabd. And in your bust, you will want to lengthen your prayer because of the joy of how tall you've become. This prayer that I'm speaking of, the prayer of the people of Allah, compare that to the protocol of sitting down in the last third of the night and struggling to get up and making sure your knee doesn't hurt, struggling for one little tajalli. Compare that to the prayer that's the journey to God, the sila ilallah, as-sila, the union with Allah. And if you don't attain union with God in your prayer is labor and it's rejected. Otherwise, it's lifted. هذه صلاة أهل الله. This is the prayer of the people of Allah. But the servants don't want it. Children of Adam refuse this prayer. God makes this prayer open to any servant. He's just, and He is the most generous of the generous. But the servants themselves insult themselves, and they don't care about that prayer, and they don't want to attain it. You have to pray until your prayer carpet disappears. And when you pray that prayer, that will be better than 100,000 prayers. The knower of God in his sleep, he is worshipping, to say nothing of his prayer. Let me tell you a story that will convey to you the status of prayer for the people of Allah. There was a man once who was snoring inside a mosque. This man was a arif billah. A arif is snoring in the mosque, a knower of God. And the congregation there, during the prayer, the arif is snoring, and there's a congregation praying, banging their foreheads up and down on the floor. The masses who are praying in that mosque are telling each other to connect their feet and shoulder to shoulder, lest Iblis comes between them like a sheep or something. Meanwhile, the Arif Billah is snoring away in the masjid. Then Iblis sends his troops to enter into the mosque so that they can distract those in prayer, so that they can raise one hand and scratch themselves or whatever it may be. But they refuse. They can't enter into the mosque. And so Iblis asks them, why don't you enter into this mosque? And Iblis tries to go in, but he can't go in either, because of the breath, the snoring of that sleeper. It keeps burning him out, and he can't go in. If he were not there snoozing away, the people in the congregation would have been devoured like sheep by Iblis. But the Arif Billah is sleeping in the divine presence. So what happens to that presence he's in? The masjid he's in becomes a meadow from the meadows of paradise. It becomes a rawda. The others, however, who are banging their foreheads on the carpet, are in a gym. Now this is the effect of Arif Billah when he's sleeping. To say nothing of what happens when he wakes up and joins them in prayer. Now to work toward this prayer, you work on Du'a al-Nur, asking for Allah to place Nur in your heart, and Nur on your right and left and in front and behind you and above and below, and Nur in your eyes and ears and so on. You're asking for constancy of direct vision of divine light in your prayer. This is foundational to the path. It's an individual obligation on every Muslim to do isqat on all the limbs in that sequence as described in the hadith. Then into your dimensions and directions, the ab'ad, the horizons. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad kama sallaita ala Sayyidina Ibrahim wa ala ali Sayyidina Ibrahim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد.